So today is Thursday, May the 13th.
Not Friday the 13th.
I know, right? But we are continuing on with the theme of courage and determination. And today our guest is Steve, and Steve is a leads individual, and Steve leads individual and team to renew health and happiness. So we all need that. He is a registered nurse and a hypnosis health coach and a MedVasta hypnosis. His program, exercising your mind to keep you mentally strong. We all need that, right? Effective workplace stress management and the five-step liberating framework have been presented to hundreds of people. And I know Steve because we belong to the same speaker group.
Right.
And we train together. And I have seen Steve speak many times. So, welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
So this is really interesting. Let me introduce myself a little bit. If you happen to just be in our group for the first time, usually I have a co-host, and her name is Sarah M. And she and I were both refugees from. She's from Cambodia. I was from Vietnam, and that was like 40 years ago. But we started this online live Facebook since last year, March 24th, and because that we want to share our thriving story, not surviving. We everybody been through survival, but getting out of survival to the thriving part is the part that is just a little hard. So we thought we share our story. But since last year's May, we start having guests to share, to spotlight on their thriving stories. So my name is Lea Tran. If you have not met me, welcome. Like I said, I was a former refugee from Vietnam, and I have gone out of fled the country with my family since May 1979, and we didn't get our chance to settle into U.S. until 1980. But during that journey, it was really difficult because we were out on the sea and hoping for international country ship anybody who spot us to rescue us. So I mean, it was definitely was not having a map or a plan where to go or what to do. We're just kind of like tossing our lives in the ocean and hope for luck. It's just a blind faith. But luckily, after 4 times of pirate assault, we did get help. And after 8 months in the refugee camps, we got to United States in Minnesota. And that was a rough journey for the first decade, but we made it. I made it. My family made it, and we are good. And now it's time that I felt like I should tell the story, not just to share the piece of history that I came from, but also to encouraging people to also share their story, break their silence, and you know get more people to get out of that trauma stage and move on and be thriving. So Steve, I know Steve have quite a few stories, but if you beside my introduction, I know it's really brief, I would love to hear your story and why did you go into a nurse route and then a hypnosis? And I'm sure you have plenty of stories to share with us in your journey of your career.
Well, I was fortunate that I had a family that was very close. The difficulty that I ran into, though, is my family was a little bit too close.
Mm,
My parents were very possessive. They were afraid that somebody would always hurt us or injure us. They kept us very close, and every place, every trip they took, we went with them. The only difficulty with having a family that's that close is you don't get to do things that normal kids do. I mean, so if you travel, if your
yeah.
parents travel, you travel with them. So you miss some summer vacations with friends, and you, we'd have a field trip downstate Illinois, and I couldn't go because my father didn't know who was driving the bus. we'd have trips that were out of state and you go by plane. We couldn't go because we didn't know who was driving who was flying the plane. So we ran into a lot of difficulties. I ran into a lot of difficulties. And I used to, of course, I wouldn't complain to my father because he was big and overbearing. So I'd complain to my mother. And my mother would say, if you don't like it, move out. And every time I'd complain, she'd say, if you don't like it, move out, from when I was a little kid. So of course she knew I wasn't going to move out. But one time when I had graduated high school in 3.5 years. And so I graduated my junior year. And I remember I was complaining to my mother, which I normally did, which was just routine. And I said something that I wanted to do. And my mother said, if your father says you can't do it, you can't do it. And I said, well, that's not fair. And she goes, well, if you don't like it, move out. And that's the time that this light bulb came up above my head. And I thought to myself, yeah, I should move out. My father and mother got married when my father wasn't even a high school graduate. And I figured I want to do what my father did. So I decided to leave home. I had been working as a cook in a restaurant and I had saved up $250 and I wanted to get an apartment. The difficulty I ran into is I left home and I took all the things that were important to me. So I took like 5 days of clothes. I took a sleeping bag and I took my stereo, which of course, until you live somewhere, there's no place to plug in your stereo.
Yeah.
So the first place I went to, yes,
that's the most important thing.
yeah, that's funny. It is actually. So I made the decision I was going to find an apartment. So I knew there were apartments around where I worked as a cook. And I went to the first one and the man said, how old are you? And I said, okay, well, I'm going to be 18 next year. He's like, I can't rent you. You're not old enough. I'm like, what? Because you have to be 18 to rent an apartment. So I went to the next one and the next one, next one. I got turned down, turned down, turned down, turned down. Well, I just couldn't face going home when I already knew that I was out. So I made the decision that since I had a place that served me food, you need the basics, you need shelter, you need air, and you need food to maintain. So I thought, well, you know what? I have a restaurant that I work with and my food is almost free. So all I need to find is shelter, and that was my car. So what I made the decision is to move into my car with my 5 sets of clothes, my sleeping bag, and my stereo system. And after the first night, I thought to myself, I feel like so dirty. I really need a shower, but I still did not want to go home. So I had belonged to a health club before I even moved out of my family's home. The health club at that time only cost like $25 a month. And the health club had a place to work out and they had a shower. And I thought, wow, I can just go to the showers every morning, work out, so I would stay healthy. And that took care of that. But then the second thing I ran into is I had clothes and I really needed to have my clothes cleaned. And on the way up the street from where the health club was, there was a cleaners. And for a certain amount of money, they would wash your clothes and they'd have them back the next day. So I'd give them 3 sets of clothes and I'd have 2, and then I'd give them 2 and keep the 3. So I kept trading off. Meanwhile, I was working at this restaurant with food, as a cook. So I thought this was going to be short term, except in Chicago, the difficulty you run into is in the winter, it gets very cold.
Yeah.
But I never noticed it. I never noticed it because I think I knew to go to sleep, get in my sleeping bag and just do what I needed to do. And the humorous part of the story is I also started going to school. I started going to college with the money that I was saving up by not having a place that I had to live, so to speak. But my alarm clock was every morning was the man who walked his dog, and his dog would urinate on my back tire. So I'd hear him talking to the dog and I could hear the dog wetting my tire at the same place that I park every night. So that was my alarm to get up, go to the health club, work out, drop off my clothes and leave for school. And I always worked in the evenings. So I did that till I was 18 years old. And what I decided first was I wanted to always become a physical therapist. That was my dream. And it turned out since my parents weren't educated, they didn't know how school works. And I assumed it worked the same way school does. You just pick your class and you go to class. You pick your class and go to class. Well, I went downstate Illinois to start in a physical therapy program. And when I went to register, the woman said, "Are you accepted in the program? I can't find your name." And I said, "Accepted? What do you mean accepted?" She goes, "You have to be accepted in the program." I said, "Well, where do I go to get accepted?" So she told me where I needed to go. And I went to the
You
room
didn't
and I said,
apply, you just show up.
"Right, I just showed up," because that's the way it was in high school. You just picked your
Right.
classes.
Okay.
So I went to the physical therapy department and said, "I want to be a physical therapist. How do I sign up so I can start classes?" And she said, "There's a 1 year wait." She goes, everybody's already registered. You have to wait a year." And I was like, "What am I going to do for a year?" So I went, and meanwhile, my parents knew that I had left for school. So I had been in communication with them, and was talking to my mother one day, and she said, "At the Rehab Institute of Chicago, they have an occupational therapy program." And she goes, "Is that the same as physical therapy?" I was like, "I don't know, but they both have the word therapy in them."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "So maybe it's somehow related." So I went and I came back to the Chicago area. I registered for the class. The wait was like only 2 months to get in. Were just starting this program up, and I got accepted. So here I was, 18 years old, and I was accepted into this program for occupational therapy. And I loved it. It was fun. And I decided when I graduated from there, what I would do is I would start working with kids, developmentally disabled kids. And I went to a school, and they paid so poorly, but I didn't know it because it was more money than what I was getting paid as a cook. So for me, it was a lot of money. Anything that was more than. So I worked at that school for a little over a year, and then a new president was coming in, and he was saying that he was going to cut reimbursement for private schools, because that's what I worked with, a private school. So now I have to make a decision on, what's next? What do I do? Because I'm going to be unemployed. So I made the decision that I would go into nursing, because there was a lot of things in nursing
Yeah.
that I could carry over from being occupational therapy. And the interesting thing is, when I did go into nursing school, within a few months, the president was elected. And what happened? He actually funded it more to private schools.
Wow.
Didn't cut them. He was even giving them more funding than they had before. But I was already in school, and I'm like, I'm not turning back. So I just kept going.
Well, first of all, I think that's a lot. There's a lot of things going on here. First of all, I want to say that I understand completely about the closeness of the family, and that turned into a control issue, because
Right.
I have the same thing with my parents, and they love you very much. And my dad, same thing, would not let us even to go to my grandma's house to sleep overnight, because he always afraid that something's going to happen to his children. I understand now, because he been through trauma when he was young, so that's why it turned into a control issue. And when you were a kid, you couldn't understand it, and you just feel like, why is everybody else can go sleep over and I can't?
Right.
So it took me many years to understand that, and I think that our family is sort of like a very, very similar. And talking about your mom's backing up your father, same thing with my mom. I mean, is in the sense that loyalty, even though it doesn't make sense, but that loyalty is like, okay, whatever husband say, I have to back him up.
Right.
And I just cannot understand that even you left and you sleep in the car and your parent knows about it. They
No.
knew about it, but they didn't worry, because Chicago is really freezing cold, and sleeping in the car was, wow. It's almost like, yeah, you were homeless.
Right. My father, actually, the first day I was gone, my father called my work while he was working.
Okay.
And the first thing he said is, "Where are you?" And I said, "Where are you calling?" He's like, "I'm calling the restaurant you work at." I said, "Okay, I'm at the restaurant." He goes, "But you didn't come home last night."
Oh, so he's
And
worried.
oh yeah, he's worried.
Yeah.
So he said, well, I want you to come home and just at least your mom's word. She wants to talk to you. So I did go home after that first day. And my father said to me, who told you you could leave? You're not an adult. And I said, what do you mean?
That's
Who
what I
told you?
was thinking. It's like
Right.
yeah,
And I said to him, I said, you know what? I know I'm not an adult, but I'm working
yeah.
and I have a way to take care of myself. And my father actually said, you're not leaving. And I said, yes, I am. And the fortunate thing is I was faster than my father was, and I made it out the door before he could close the door, before I could get out the door. And I
You had
left.
strong will, very strong will.
I did. Well, the thing is, I just didn't want to hear somebody tell me anymore, if you don't like it, move out. And my
Yeah.
mother was saying that not realistically, she wasn't saying because she wanted me to
He
move
didn't think
out.
that you
She
would.
just didn't think I would. And it just hit that point.
Yeah.
But once I left, I did keep in contact with my parents, and I actually told them a little white lie. I told them I was staying over by my friend. I had a friend's name was Gary, that I was staying over by Gary's. I never told them that I was in the car. I know
Oh, I
because I know
see.
they
They
would have
would have
gone,
freaked out.
they would have
Yeah.
freaked out. But the thing is, I knew it's something that I needed to do. I knew I needed to. I was living in a very dependent role
Mm.
in a house, and I
Are you
knew that
the
I needed to.
oldest, Steve?
No, I'm right in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle. So I knew I had to make the
But that's
decision though.
courage. That is
Yeah,
some strong will and courage to build an independent life.
right.
Now, I can't say the same because I think you have an advantage being a male. Being a female, I think is a little harder to be out there on the street. So it just I don't want to say that you can't, but I think you probably would think twice about being a female out there on the street than a male could. But I don't
I
think,
right. I think if you're male or female, one thing that's important, and I mean that case is not to let anybody know that you're homeless,
yeah.
because I always came into work with clean clothes.
Mm.
I always was, I always had showered. I went to school dressed with clothes that were, that
You
were
had a
ironed and
plan.
pleated.
You
Well, the plan just fell into place.
uh-huh.
But the thing is not to tell people that you're vulnerable
Yeah,
so people won't take advantage of your vulnerability.
right.
I think was the important thing. I was afraid to tell anybody that,
Yeah.
I just I just
It's a
talked
very
with myself.
courageous things to do. It is a
Yeah.
very courageous things to do. Even though that that temporarily, but still, it takes guts to do what you did.
Mhm.
But so you kind of like falling into the nursing in, because of the registrations and you already in place and you didn't want to take the time to redo on the other. Are you happy with what you're doing?
Yeah, I am very happy with what I'm doing. In occupational therapy, I was in a helping place. Being in a nurse, I was in a helping place. Going into hypnotherapy, I'm in a helping place. There's something about, and I know you probably see this too, when you go and you do something for somebody or somebody does something that you show them how to do, and
Yeah,
then all of a sudden they're doing it.
yeah.
It lights me up. And even today, sometimes I'll see people and they're just like, Steve, why are you so excited? It's me who's done it. I said,
But it's gratifying to
I
see
said,
that.
right. I can't tell you why. I said, but there's something about seeing you being able to do something,
Yeah,
because I think I know how I myself got through things,
right.
and I knew what a reward there was, and I know what a reward there was for somebody to be able
Yeah,
to do something that they weren't able to do before.
yeah. And you see progress and you see that how they get out of their comfort zone to start doing things to
Right.
benefit them. So, how did you get into the hypnosis part? I mean, being a nurse is one thing, but hypnosis is like, it's going deeper.
Well, what was interesting about hypnosis is I one day I was seeing patients at home. I did IVs, infusions, medications like hydrations, antibiotics, feedings at home. And one day I went and I had about 2 hours between patients. And I ended up at a candy store. For me, it was a candy store. It was the library. The
Okay,
library for me is a candy store
cool.
because there's so much knowledge there. And I decided what I wanted to do is I wanted to find a book on Buddhism. I always was interested in learning about Buddhism.
Hmm.
So I found this book on Buddhism and I started reading it. It was probably about 5 chapters. And I read the first chapter and it was really interesting. And I read the second chapter. And when I started reading the second chapter, it started becoming redundant of the first chapter. So I went to put it away on the library shelf. And in the library, libraries are set up there. They have this Dewey Decimal System where you put your book, it's by numbers. But this book on Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism, I couldn't remember where I got it from, and I couldn't find the area. And while I was looking for the place to go, I saw a book on hypnosis at the library. And I went, and it was a very short book. And I read the whole book really quickly. It was probably 90 pages, 100 pages. And I read through it. And I left the library to see my next patient. And it turned out the next patient I saw, it was a man who had prostate cancer. He was treated for the prostate cancer with chemotherapy and radiation. But when they radiated the prostate, they somehow hit his bowel and burnt it.
Oh my God.
So now when I went to see him, this is the part that he told me, and I don't know if it's totally true, but he said they burnt his bowel and they told him there's nothing they could do to repair it. And the prostate, the treatment for the prostate, they said was 98% effective, but the treatment for being able to do anything for the bowel, they really didn't have a technique or a technology so they said to him, we just want to let you know that you have probably about 2 to 3 weeks. We're sorry this has happened, but they sent him home.
Wow.
So here, when you talk about things just happen, is I went to his house and I wasn't sure exactly. They had asked me to just go there and assess him, which was something that I usually didn't do. I usually did an IV with someone, but I went to assess him and he started telling me the story as it unfolded. And I had just read this book and it just piqued more knowledge than I had, just earlier in the year. And I just said to him, I said, have you ever been on a body of water? And he's like, what? I said, have you ever been on a body of water? Have you ever been on the lake? Have you ever been to a river? Have you ever been on a stream? And he told me that he used to canoe down the Mississippi River. So I said to him, I said, you know what? Close your eyes for a minute and just imagine that you're on the Mississippi River. And all of a sudden, there's a fork that goes off to the left. And you decide you're going to explore that fork. And as you paddle down the fork, all of a sudden you notice all the water that's behind you isn't going forward. It's just kind of like pooling in the area that you're like. Meanwhile, the river keeps running. And I said, as you keep paddling, all of a sudden you come to a tree. And the tree has fallen across the fork and it's blocking the water from going through. But when enough water comes behind that tree branch, it kind of like pushes the branch forward and all the water gushes out. And then the branch just comes back again in place where it was before. And I said, that's what's happening to you. You have a river that is hitting a blocked branch in your system.
Okay.
And I said, so what you need to do is make changes. And he's like, what changes do I need to make? I said, are you eating? He goes, no. He goes, because I'm dying. What good does eating have to do? I said, are you drinking? No. Are you going to the bathroom? No. Are you on pain medicine? Yeah. Well, I knew that alone caused blockage. Then he was on maybe about a half dozen other medicines. And I said, for you to go past 2 to 3 weeks is imagine that river, and the way you move the water through that fork of the river is you need to get sediment in it. More sediment moves the branch quicker. I said, so you have to eat, even small amounts, you have to start eating. So on that first visit, I started working with him on talking to him about eating, drinking, getting up out of bed, not just laying there and doing something. And meanwhile, I had just learned about hypnosis. So the part that I did with him on the river was just something that I read in the book about doing visualization.
Amazing. That is amazing.
So I went and I was only by insurance allowed to make one visit with him, just to do the evaluation. And as I left his home, I said to him, I said, I'm glad I had a chance to meet you. I said, good luck with your death in 2 or 3 weeks. And he looked up in his bed. He goes, but I thought you told me I have more than 2 or 3 weeks. I said, well, the thing is, what's important in life is what you believe is what's going to happen. And if you believe you have 2 to 3 weeks,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what I say. You know, you know, probably with your own family, it doesn't matter what you say to them. What they believe is what they believe. And I said to him, I just said, well, if you want me to come back, I'll call up the company I work for. They'll call your insurance company, and I'll tell them that we need to do 5 days this week of pain control. And he's like, fine. So, and I said, and we'll once a week for the next 8 weeks, we'll do hypnotherapy sessions. I was like, fine. So I, of course, was doing this with him. I was reading as much as I could about doing, you know, this. And at the end of 8 weeks or 60 days or 63 days, I had to say to him, I'm saying, I have to tell you, you've disappointed me. And he said, what? I said, you disappointed me. He goes, why? I said, well, this is like 60 days after I first met you. I said, you let me down. You did not die in 2 to 3 weeks. And he starts laughing at me.
Oh my God.
Because and then I said to him, I said, but I have to tell you something. I have to stop seeing you. And he's like, why? I said, because for a nurse to see a patient at home, there's got to be something wrong. There's got to be a reason. That's the only reason insurance pays is they pay you to be sick. So then he says to me, he said, Steve, you know what? I have indigestion. And I said, well, you know what? I can't prescribe a medicine. I'm not a doctor. I said, so let's call your oncologist, your cancer doctor up and ask him, you know, what to take. So we call up his oncologist. This is when phones are still connected to the wall at this time.
Yeah.
So we call up his doctor, and we get his doctor on the phone. And I said, hi, I'm here. The patient's name was Angus. His first name was Angus. I said, I'm here with Angus, and he has indigestion. What can he take? And the doctor said, Angus, he's still alive? And I said, yeah.
Oh my God.
So the doctor says to me, tell Angus that he has to come back down to my office for me to see him before I'll prescribe anything. And Chicago and Angus are probably about 45, 50 miles apart. So I put my hand over the phone. I'm like, Angus, doctor wants to see you. He won't prescribe anything until he sees you. And then Angus says, but Steve, why does he want to see me? I put my hand again over the phone and I went up to him. I said, Angus, he wants to know why you're not dead. He looks at me, he goes, what? I said, he wants to know why you're not dead. So Angus says to me, he goes, Steve, hang up on him. I'm like, Angus, this is the head of oncology. This is the head of the department. I can't hang up on him. And Angus says to me, he goes, Steve, hang up the phone on him. And I did. I felt great because I've never had the chance to hang up on a doctor before. He felt great because you know what? There's something about taking control, which he now is even taking even more control of his life. And then he said to me, so what do I take? And I said, Angus, I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. And Angus said something that I taught him to say. And he said to me, he said, Steve, if you were a doctor, what would you tell me to take? And I was like, oh, I would just tell you to take milk and magnesia. He's like, okay. You never told me to prescribe it. You just told me what a doctor you would do if you were a doctor. And he took it. And the interesting thing about the whole thing is I met him first in July. I discharged him in October. His birthday was January 1st. He turned 81 that year. And he was still on January 1st, he was still around. And in March, his wife called me and said, I just want to let you know Angus passed away. And I said, okay. I said, was it the cancer? She goes, no. And I said, was it something with his gastrointestinal area? She said, no. She said, he had a heart. He had a heart attack. I mean, his cardiac problem. And she said to me, I said, well, how did that happen? And she said to me, in total, she said, Steve, he was an old fart. You know, he was 81 years old. He was an old fart. And then but then she asked me the question, that she said, do you think the chemotherapy and radiation had an effect on his heart? And I said, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So she says to me, but Steve, if you were a doctor, what would you say? And I was just like, damn. And she went and he taught her this, how to do this. So I said, I would say, yes, that medicine had an effect on him. So she started laughing. I started laughing. It was really quite interesting. But that's where the point where I said to myself, you know what? There's got to be a way to decrease medication intake and increase people's stress, their anxiety, to make them stronger, to prevent them from getting sick. So that's what I decided to do. Is the company I work for, I saw a lot of patients who had cancer. I introduced a lot of self-hypnosis techniques to them, tools to them, certain other things I worked with them on, and a lot of them did well. A
So
lot, yeah.
did you go after you read that book and then you use it on him just on one reading, and you like it so much? Did you go to certify and start
Yes,
doing all those hypnosis therapy?
right. I went to in the Chicago area. I met someone who actually had classes. I wasn't thrilled with the class because they taught more from a mystical background. So then I went and I found an anesthesiologist in Tennessee who actually taught classes. And then because he gave me more of a science background of,
Mm-hmm.
how hypnotherapy works. And then, I mean, I've gone through classes since then. I've talked with other people. I've seen things that work. So I just continue,
That is so awesome.
learning. Yeah,
So you actually using the mind to control pain rather than using medication to control pain.
right. A lot of things I do. I work with a lot of healthcare professionals. Even before the pandemic, I had people
Uh-huh.
coming in who were healthcare professionals that were stressed and anxiety. But the thing is, the big thing that I love to do is people who are on chemotherapy,
Mm.
decreasing their adverse effects of having that nausea,
Right, right.
um, and people who are having a pain, trying to decrease their pain. You never want to eliminate somebody's pain completely
Yeah.
because then they're
How
totally aware
effective
of it.
is it? Like if you do it, would you let's say that if you have enormous pain or nauseation after the radiation, is hypnopeace can actually reduce maybe 50%,
Yeah, it
60%?
can. What I usually like to do is I'm someone who likes to be proactive.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell people, you know what, before you go in for therapy, let me show you what we need to do. It work because it's very hard to catch somebody's attention when they're in pain to
Right.
then work on their pain. But if you can show them a few tools that they can work on before
Mm-hmm.
they're going through a therapy or they're
Mm-hmm.
having a procedure, it works better.
Okay. So
Or
this is not the hypnotherapy that you just sit there and listen to them going to the past or, get all their tragic story out. This is something that self-hypnotize so you can reduce the pain in your body.
right. I mean, going back, I do have people go. I have people who have come in with issues that started from when they were children. I mean,
Mm.
we utilize that also, but this is where I want to teach people to um, do things on their own, play on their
Yeah,
own before things happen.
right,
And the more you do things, like walking, you didn't know how to walk when you were born, but with
right,
repetition becomes what you call subcortical. It just becomes automatic.
right.
So if I go and I say to you, Leah, you have a pain in your thumb, and I say, just do this every day, every day, every day. Before you know it, you don't even notice that
Right.
you're not having pain because automatically you do something that you
Yeah.
and I worked on.
The subconscious mind
It's
is
subconscious.
powerful. It's
It sure is.
powerful.
It
And
sure
I
is.
think if we can just tap into that a little bit, we can do a whole lot of
Right,
more courageous thing that we didn't ever think that we could.
right.
But this
Yeah,
is really interesting, and oh my God, I could talk to you for another 3 hours just because I am so curious about what you're doing, and I think that is so so cool. That so you are a traveling nurse, I suppose. You're a field nurse, or you?
I see I see people. I have a clinic in
Okay,
west of Chicago that I see people at. I see some people virtual online, and sometimes
okay,
I'll go out to people's homes, especially if they can't leave home.
right. And I
I
think with
work with them at
Zoom
home.
now, you can actually have a class on Zoom and help people
Right,
manage their pain or their whatever problem just to
right,
reduce the amount of medication. I think sometimes
right,
we have been relying so much about pill pusher. You know, when you go to a doctor, first thing you complain something, and he or she would just automatically take a notepad out and start prescribing. And I was
right.
like, don't you want to ask me, did I sleep well? Did I eat well? Did I stress out or anything before you push another pill out? But that seems like the case nowadays. That doctors just so
Yeah,
easily to it's just so much easier. And then when you have side effect from that drug, they give you another drug to take care of the side effect
yeah.
of the drug.
Unfortunately, yeah, that happens. I had a woman earlier today, and she lost her husband, and she went to go see a doctor, and then she went to see a psychiatrist, and she's on 3 medications. And the thing is, I explained to her, as I said, what you have is situational, an event that's situational, loss of your
Yeah,
husband. So medicine doesn't bring your husband back. And the
right.
only thing that you're going to get from medicine is you're going to get some relief, but it's just a patch. What happens if all of a sudden it's like being in Texas and you run out of gas and you
Yeah,
don't have your medicine anymore? What's
right,
going to happen then? So
right.
what I really want people to do is to be dependent on themselves,
Yeah.
to make themselves stronger.
This give me an idea. I would love to have you back at some point and maybe have a little demonstration about some very typical stuff. I know that uh, you charge patient, but like some of the very even migraine or something
Sure.
very easy things that people can tap into their subconscious mind and maybe just get a little relief for whatever pain that they are dealing with.
Right.
But it's so interesting, Steve. Like I said, we run a little over time. Sorry, people. If you need to go, you need to go. But I'm just so enjoying the topic that. But anyhow, uh, thank you again, Steve, so much for coming in and
Oh,
sharing
thank
with
you.
us
Thank you
your
for,
courage and the way that you help people to be courageously tap into their subconscious mind.